Good morning. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us, along with longtime Democratic activist Betsy Sweet and former state senator and Yarmouth Town Councilor Phil Harriman. Good to see you both.
Good morning, Pat.
Good morning.
Pretty big news out of Augusta when the legislature's Oversight Committee has filed suit against the Department of Health and Human Services to get access to records in the deaths of several children last year. Now, the Attorney General has said it would violate state law to turn these documents over to those legislators. But it was a bipartisan vote by the committee, Phil, but is it going to be politically harmful for Janet Mills that essentially the legislature is suing her and her administration here?
I don't think so. We'll see what comes out after the elections. The elections will be over by then, but I think it's remarkable that the legislature, in a bipartisan way, and also remember that in Maine's legislature, House and Senate committees serve together. So for the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans to agree on wanting this information tells you there's a pretty strong desire by legislators to get to the answers. And the Attorney General, rightly, I suspect, is saying, we can't give it to you at this point.
So does this transcend the election, you think?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think it's such an important issue, and it's so critical with what's happening to our kids. And I'm really glad that they came together to ask for this information. And I think it's on the department's side. It's hard because they have to watch confidentiality and stuff, but we have to get to the bottom of what's happening, why we're having so many kids in crisis. And I hate, and I don't want it to be a political issue. This is really about all of us coming together to protect kids.
And of course, many of these legislators believe they're just going to have to change the statute in the next legislative session, probably to get past this roadblock. The 1st District congressional race has been pretty quiet. This week, 7-term Representative Shelley Pingree faced off with Republican newcomer Ed Thielander in a News Center Maine Voice of the Voter Forum. It's the last time they're scheduled to appear together. Betsy, how did these candidates do?
I thought they did great, and it was actually nice to see a debate that wasn't full of rancor and finger pointing and name calling and stuff. So I don't think Ed did much to tell people they should change who they've got already in Washington. I think Shelley's done a great job and continues to do that and brings a lot home for Maine, and is a really good voice and has a lot of seniority. So I don't think he made a case that I'm the guy who should replace her, but I thought it was good, and I thought Shelley was on top of the issues, as she always is.
Phil, Shelley Pingree, of course, a very experienced politician at this level, and Ed Thielander admits, I'm still learning.
Yeah, and he's been a class act. As you've reported, he had some missteps and some quotes that he had to pull back, but he also followed that up with an apology, which, as you probably know from your years interviewing politicians, is rare to get an apology.
That is true.
And Shelley Pingree and I go back to the last century. we served together in the Senate. She
might not want you pointing that out.
No, but I just did, and it's Sunday morning, so forgive me, Shelley. She's done a great job of sticking true to her progressive approach to politics, but also reminding people that she's connected on Main Street.
Battle for the control of the legislature is on the ballot, of course. Democrats are far outpacing Republicans in spending on legislative races, including some big targets, such as Senate President Troy Jackson's effort to hold his seat against Republican challenger Sue Bernard up in Aroostook County. Overall, the spending margin is about 4-1. Portland Press-Herald reports outside groups have spent more than $200,000 to support Troy Jackson, and the totals are likely much higher by now. Phil, are you surprised by the level of interest by outside groups in who runs the Maine legislature?
Actually, I'm not. I think, for the president of the Senate to be in a race where he could lose is alarming to those who want him to stay in office and his agenda to be front and center. So to attract that kind of money tells me how high a quality opponent he has. And let's go back to clean elections. That was supposed to get all this money out of politics. And then we were given to ranked choice voting to get all this rancor out of politics. What we're seeing is just the opposite.
Well, I'll disagree with you about that. Because
shocked.
I think what happened was the legislature changed the original the original Clean Elections Act, because it originally covered all these independent expenditures from outside groups, and they were matched as well. Then the legislature undid that, and that's where the problem is. This isn't when the rank and file regular people, where it works incredibly well. But I think one of the important things is all these outside groups, the reason there's so, and I hate it, so let's just be clear about that, but the reason that there's so much interest from national groups now on state level is because there's such gridlock in Washington, with Mitch McConnell, and no matter who's in charge, gridlock saying, no, we're not going to get anything done. So a lot of really important issues like choice, like reproductive choice and all that are coming to the state level. So now outside groups that have a national interest are now looking at state legislatures across the country and saying, oh, this is where the action is going to be.
Yeah, this is where change comes.
Yeah.
All right. In an interview on 207 this past week, former Governor Paul LePage, who's running for a third term in the Blaine House, denied ever saying that the 2020 presidential election was stolen.
Joe Biden won the election, period. I never said he didn't win. I never, ever would have challenged the election in 2020. In fact, I'm just the opposite. I believe that Donald Trump said that, but I don't agree. Joe Biden got the Electoral College, and in my mind, that was it. I never challenged his winning. I never challenged Joe Biden winning the election. He won fair and square.
We'll look at the record on that.
Please look at the record, because I don't believe I've ever said that.
In fact, the record shows that LePage did say that in an interview on WGAN radio 10 days after the 2020 election.
I tell you, this is clearly a stolen election. We know that they've stolen the election. People have voted more than once.
So, Betsy, why would Paul LePage, perhaps he forgot, or I don't know, where does this come from?
Oops, right? That's a big oops. I think it points to something deeper, which is how often politicians try and read the tea leaves, and try and say, okay, what do people want to hear? Where's my base? What is my base thinking? So instead of being on their true north and, okay, this is what I truly believe, they try and follow what the tea leaves say. So instead of leading people, they're following people. And back then, 10 days after the election, as we recall, that was a big, everyone was going to think that. Now lawsuit after lawsuit and investigation after investigation, not so much. So it really, to me, speaks more to someone holding on to their true north. And I have to say that one of my things I love about Phil is that as an elected official, I always felt like you were in your true north, regardless of what the political winds were saying. So I think those politicians are rare today. And I don't think Paul LePage is one of them.
What do you take from this, Phil?
I'm flattered. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you. Oops.
Yeah.
It's a oops. I don't want to justify it. 10 days after the election, a lot of emotions were spewing.
And maybe he was thinking, I'd like to work in the Trump administration.
There's that.
Yeah.
Mayor Kate Snyder talks about polarization in Portland in her State of the City address this past week. Former Mayor and Congressman Tom Allen says he has never seen the city so politically divided. But this being Portland, Phil, is the divide right versus left or left versus further left?
Oh, I think it's the progressives versus the socialists, and they're all self-proclaimed. It's not me putting a label on them. And I think this is an example for the rest of the state who watch the political brew. What's going on in Portland could come to a town near you where activists decide to legislate through ballot initiatives, and it makes it very complicated and very messy. And I'm eager to see the outcome because it's going to set the tone for the city and the state going forward.
Well, I have a different take on it, not surprisingly. I think this is not between political parties. This is between an entrenched governing body and people whose basic needs aren't being met. Let's face it. Portland has a full-on affordability crisis, that people can't afford rent, the wages aren't high enough, most people are getting priced out of Portland. And people are saying, hey, we want you to do something about that. This is not okay. And through a very transparent, democratic process, both how the city government works and then the specific things, they're coming to the voters and saying, no, we want our needs met. And that's where it is. It's between this entrenched group that doesn't want to do much and people are saying, we're dying out here. Our shelters are full. We've got people on the streets. We don't make enough money. There's no transportation. We can't make this work. That's what I think the divide is. And I think that people have, now people have an opportunity to do it. And let's say, in 2020, they spoke. Rent control, increased minimum wage, more affordable housing. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I think people, the vast majority of people are speaking and saying, we want our needs met.
Now, we're accustomed to seeing political candidates go to county fairs, for example, to eat all the local food and so forth and show off how much of a person of the people they are. Here's something unusual. Congressman Jared Golden was caught on camera this past weekend shotgunning a beer with a student at UMaine Homecoming in Orono. That student's family is part of the fishing community, and he had urged Golden to have a beer for the lobstermen. Now, Republicans were silent on the matter, but independent Tiffany Bond suggested, well, Jared Golden can be in charge of tailgating, and she'll handle the legislative chores. Betsy, what do you make of this? Is this a good campaign move for the man of the people, or kind of just silly?
I think it's silly. Shotgunning a beer, I think, is silly in general, but hey, do whatever you want. But, I think that we're making too much of it. I think, this is somebody asked him to do something, and I doubt that it was a calculated political move to say, oh, this will look good with the guy on the street if I'm doing this. I think it probably was just a piece of the moment. And I think, I think it is important to support this fisherman, and I think, this kid saying that.
Given the current political climate, if he'd been caught refusing to have a beer for the lobstermen, that might have blown up in his face too, right?
Absolutely. Well, here's a coffee to the lobstermen on Sunday morning.
Right.
But I think Jared was demonstrating his support. I'm sure the family of the fishermen appreciated it. The fact that it made it into the news without going through the Republican spin machine tells you all you need to know.
Very wisely left that one alone.
Yeah.
Let's finish up with our winners and losers in politics this week. Betsy, we'll start with you.
Okay, so my winners this week are the over 10,000 people and thousands of people across this state who have already requested absentee ballots and are already ready to vote, and record turnout in early voting in Georgia. So if you don't have a plan to vote, make one, but the voters are my winners this week. And the losers are actually the corporations that are taking huge advantage of this inflationary pressure to gouge prices and to raise their profits. If you look at the profit lines for major corporations and major sectors, it's going like this, and they're blaming it on inflation, and that's not where it belongs, and they're turning it into a political hot button where it's an economic greed of corporations.
And Phil?
My political loser this week is Liz Truss, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for 44 days. One and done. My winner this week is the hospitals in Maine, who are getting some pandemic relief in the amount of $24 million. They're getting those dollars in proportion to their Medicaid patients, and hopefully helps them stay afloat and lowers our medical expenses.
From the Biden administration. The Biden administration is your winner of the week. I'm all for it.
just that little footnote.
Yeah,
don't
just thought I'd mention it.
Phil Harriman, Betsy Sweet, thank you as always. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.